Okay, so hello and welcome back to this week's live stream. I'm Gordon Morse, your natural English coach, and it's time for this week's lesson. So as usual, I've got 5 more questions about natural English that I'm about to answer for you. All right, our first question is, I hear people say be sure to or be sure not to do something. How do I use them properly? So, these two phrases have opposite meanings because one is be sure to and the other is be sure to not. Be sure to means you should definitely do something. The word sure itself is the same meaning as certain or definite or guarantee, if you understand the meanings of those words as well. Another way that sure is used in a spoken casual setting is when somebody says, are you sure? Like, are you sure about that? That means, do you think it's true, or are you certain, right? Do you definitely think that you should do that? So for example, when someone asks you a question, like, do you think it will rain today? And you say, yes, definitely. The person might say, are you sure? Because maybe they think you aren't completely, maybe they think that you don't actually know it's going to rain. But be sure to is often used when giving advice. So someone will say, be sure to do this or be sure to do that. And in the opposite way, be sure to not is used to tell people not to do something or to avoid doing something. So, for example, be sure to call me when you arrive at your destination. So this basically means that when you arrive, you definitely need to call me. Be sure to call me. Or, she should be sure to not make her boss angry. So you do not want to make your boss angry, definitely, right? Be certain to not. So she should be sure to not make her boss angry. The phrase be sure to not can be a little bit tricky because when people are speaking natural, casual English, sometimes they will switch the words to and not. So some people might actually say, be sure not to do something. It's hard to say exactly which one is correct or not, and it doesn't really matter when you're just speaking casually. You'll just hear them both, and if you say them either way, you'll probably be understood just fine. So don't worry about that too much. And finally, as I mentioned earlier with are you sure, sometimes people just use the word sure by itself to mean yes or definitely in response to a question. So, someone says, oh, do you want to go eat now? You say, sure. It's just a casual way of saying, yes, I do. All right. Second question now. When my friend speaks casual English, I hear her say trying to as tryna and going to as gonna. Is there a difference in meaning? So you probably have studied this a little bit before because it's so common now. But obviously this is one of the really big sort of difficulties or issues with learning to hear spoken English because some words completely change their sound when they're spoken casually or quickly. The important thing is that there's no difference in meaning. It's just about natural speech patterns. So the reason why this happens is that in English, as is many other languages, making several consonant sounds in a row is difficult. Consonant, if you remember, is basically the closed sound that your mouth makes when you're speaking different sounds. There's consonants and there's vowels. The vowel sounds are a, I, u, e, o. The open sounds and the consonants are basically everything else, right? So depending on the language, especially in English at least, most spoken forms of English, having too many consonant sounds together when you're trying to speak quickly doesn't really work because it slows you down, and a lot of times people want to speak as quickly as they're thinking. So for going to, the G and the T sounds naturally blend together when you're speaking quickly. So that ends up sounding like gonna. Going to sounds like gonna. The T sound just disappears completely, as it often does with many small words like to, or stuff like that. Mostly the word to. Basically just disappears altogether in casual, quick speech. And because the G is kind of like a hard stop sound in going to, it also disappears. So the two stop sounds of G and T disappear and you just squish everything else together. It's basically the same thing that happens with should have. So again, the D sound, should, and then have is another kind of like sound that you have to start from again. So should have turns into shoulda, and basically the have just turns into the sound at the end of should. Shoulda. I should have gone, right? Instead of I should have gone. Or we have the two T sounds in want to. Want to. Again, it just sounds very unnatural and it's difficult to say when you're speaking quickly. So want to becomes wanna, just much easier. And basically, unless someone is trying to speak very clearly and slowly, pretty much every natural speaker of English does this. So it's important to get used to. Even when you see the words should have or want to written out somewhere, if you're reading them, it's more natural to squish them together as shoulda and wanna. But basically, what was the last thing I wanted to touch on about this? It's just it's an important thing to acknowledge and also to get used to hearing when you're listening to other people speak. All right, so our next question. When I arrived at work, a colleague asked me, "What's it like out there?" Does out there mean outside? The answer is yes. Yes, it does. So, this casual phrase means, what is the weather right now? So notice that what's it like out there, it doesn't say weather, so it's easy to become confused. It means weather, basically. What is the weather right now? A similar phrase you will also hear is, what's the weather doing? You probably won't hear that one as much as, what's it like out there? What's it like out there is very common and casual. What's the weather doing is casual but a little less common. So what's it like out there? You can also drop the there word to just say, what's it like out? Which can be even more confusing if someone says it very quickly or shortly. But basically, when someone asks you, what's it like out, or what's it like out there, usually the speaker just wants to know the main thing that is happening with the weather. They want to know if it's cold or warm, or if it's raining, or if it's cloudy, that kind of thing. They're not asking you for a full weather report. They just want to know what the weather is mostly doing outside. And a lot of times people will use this question as a conversation starter. When you first meet somebody, especially if you're coming from outside into a building, it's just an easy way to start a conversation. They say, "Oh, what's it like out there?" and then you tell them the weather, and then you just continue into a conversation. All right, here's our fourth question for this week. It's difficult to pronounce the W sound at the beginning of words, like wing or wait. Why is that? So, again, when we're talking about pronunciation, it's always useful to think about how do you pronounce these words using the Japanese syllables, and how do you pronounce them more naturally in English? Because, of course, there are so many English words you just use very naturally and commonly in Japanese when you're speaking Japanese. However, because you're doing that, those words become converted or shifted into Japanese syllabary, i.e. using Japanese syllables that are the a, I, U, E, O, ta, chi, tsu, te, to, etc. So in that case, wing, the English word wing, becomes wingu, wingu, and wait is weto, weto, like waitress or something like that. The U sound is different than the English W sound. That's the key there. So basically, to make a strong, natural W sound in English, you have to hold the U sound and close your lips a little bit more. So watch my mouth. U, 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 wing, uingu, uingu. So that's the Japanese, right? Uingu. But if I want to say wing, my mouth almost completely closes instead of uingu. When I say the U sound, my mouth is still a little bit open. There's a hole there, but wing, my lips are almost completely closed, and that's what makes the strong W sound, is when you release the air through your lips. When you want to make a strong W sound, think of the wa or wo sounds in Japanese, because they have a stronger W sound that is closer to a natural English W sound. So here are a few words that you can practice with to get better at your natural W sounds. So instead of uata, it's water, water, water. Or instead of uinta, it's winter, winter, winter. Or instead of uddo, it's wood, wood, wood. And instead of huesto, it's west, west. So I recommend practicing these 4 words, and practice them slowly and listen to yourself. Recording yourself is always very useful. Just practice them several dozen times or so each day, and you'll find yourself getting better at that strong W sound. All right, our last question for today. What's the proper way of asking or talking about someone's religious beliefs in English? So this is less of a language question and more of a culture question. However, I think they're still useful to talk about here because language is culture. That's as simple as that. So talking about religion in most English-speaking countries is a very complex, or it can be a very complex and tricky subject. There are many, many different kinds of religious beliefs in English-speaking countries. I really only know a little bit about my country, America, but it's different for every English-speaking country. And there are different parts of each country that are totally different as well. I happen to be from a part that is not very religious. There are still plenty of religious people who go to church where I live, but in my family, we were not very religious at all, and we didn't really think about it. But I've met many people, I have many friends who are religious. But even then, the place where I live is very different from somewhere more down south in America. So, as I just mentioned, some places are very religious. It's very important, and some places are not so religious. It's hard to give very specific advice without the context in which you're in, because everybody is different and everyone will react differently. So I'm just going to give you some very basic tips here. So it's always useful to establish a good relationship before you ask these kinds of questions. You know, it's not the kind of thing of saying, do you like cats or dogs? Or, you know, what kind of sweets do you like? Or where are you from? It's usually a more personal question for a lot of people. So a couple of ways that are generally not going to cause much offense are questions like, are you religious at all? Or are you a member of a particular church? Words like particular or at all aren't completely necessary, but as you have probably learned from previous videos, sometimes adding in extra words can help soften the meaning or soften the feeling of a sentence. And when you're dealing with a subject that can possibly be like a little bit sensitive, sometimes using those words to soften a feeling can actually be very useful for interacting with people. The thing is that sometimes if you just ask about someone's religion for no clear reason, people will be suspicious about why you're asking. Because some people might think, oh, are you trying to get me to come to your religion? Maybe they think that if they say no, then you will say, oh, well, you should join my religion. It might be that even if you do ask this in a very polite way, you might find that some people act a little bit suspicious or kind of like, you know, they might get a little bit nervous about it. But if you can show them that you're just curious and be polite about it, most people will be comfortable. Although you have to also think about if you're comfortable as well, because some people might be very religious, and then if you ask, they might try to start bringing you to their religion. So you have to think about what kind of conversation do you want to have and what are you comfortable with. It's always great to use English or any other language to connect with people who are not part of your home culture. And learning how to do that where everyone is comfortable and creating better feelings and better bonds between people is a really useful and great thing that language can be used for. But that's why we try to learn more than just the grammar, because these are things that grammar just can't account for, right? All right, and as always, I have a question for you this week. What is something that you should be sure to do every day? So, for example, I might say, you should be sure to brush your teeth every day. But of course, everyone has different routines. So the question is, what should you be sure to do every day? As usual, I recommend that you answer this question out loud to yourself and record your answer on your phone or your laptop or something like that. And then you can listen to yourself later and listen for your mistakes or your errors, and then record it again and keep practicing like that. All right, so thank you very much for watching as usual this week. If you did learn something, please leave a like on the video or comment or subscribe and share the video so that more people can watch. And also, the more people that watch, the more content I will be able to make. This current week is not actually a live stream because unfortunately I have to go somewhere. But if you leave a comment on the video, I will see it and be able to respond to your question as with any other previous video. And also, if you are interested in learning more natural English, you can go to my website down below and take a free natural English assessment. I will see it and I will be able to respond to you personally and give you some useful feedback. All right, So until next week, see you later.